It's the middle of the 20th century. Post-World War II Europe is still mostly in ruins, crippled, and yet another wave of misfortune. Riots in Norway, Greece, and Turkey. A communist coup in Czechoslovakia. The Soviet blockade of West Berlin. Moscow was trying to extend its sphere of influence in Europe. To counter this, a new military and political bloc was created, NATO. NATO was initially created as a U.S. umbrella, but which took responsibility for post-war life in Western European countries. They were to assure that the Soviet regime would not spread to the countries in Western Europe. Everyone saw communism for what it really was. There was Nazism, there were concentration camps. Turned out that communism was an even harsher system. More concentration camps, more people killed, more sentenced. There was a need to defend against communism. During its existence, NATO expanded 5 times until reaching its current strength of 28 members. The alliance's main goal is providing defense for member states, but it does have other mandates. NATO regularly participates in UN peacekeeping missions. Until the mid-1990s, the organization had never engaged in military operations. NATO forces first saw combat in former Yugoslavia in 1995 when the country split into 6 states and fell into a bloody ethnic war. Even today, the future of the alliance does not seem to be in question, despite changing politics in Europe. We are now observing a Eurosceptic trend in Europe. A lot of political parties say that the EU hasn't justified itself, but you won't find a single Eurosceptic party which would support exit from NATO. The same Brexit supporters in England in no way are doubting their continued membership in NATO. NATO's existence may not be under threat, but it is facing a challenge from a historical antagonist. In 1954, the USSR applied for NATO membership but was refused. The collapse of the Soviet Union did not diminish the need for NATO. Russia's increasing aggression towards neighboring states requires continued vigilance. Moscow has repeatedly used anti-NATO rhetoric, spreading myths about NATO tanks at its borders to justify its own invasion of other countries. Ukraine's Crimea was a victim of these evolving tactics, but Russia's tactics aren't exactly new. This song was popular in the Soviet Union. Before invading Czechoslovakia in 1968, we were also told that we got ahead of the Americans, told that German and American tanks were ready to go for Czechoslovakia, and that we'd outpace them. Following its independence, Ukraine began a working relationship with NATO in 1992. Today, according to Ukraine's 2015 military doctrine, the country's main task is to develop a stronger partnership with the alliance. The Ukrainian army must be up to NATO standards by 2020. Ukrainians are also increasingly interested in moving closer to the alliance. According to the Razumkov Center and the Democratic Initiatives Fund, around 62% of Ukrainians would take part in a referendum to join NATO, and 72% of those would vote in approval. After the Russian aggression, the public opinion of NATO has drastically changed. Almost for the entire period of independence in our country, the Ukrainian mainly thought that neutrality was the best status. When people were asked why are they against NATO, they replied that they were afraid of military conflicts. But everything changed after the war with Russia started. After the illegal annexation of Crimea and the invasion by Russian forces in Donbass, NATO created 6 trust funds to support Ukraine. Their goal? Strengthen Ukraine's ability to secure and defend its country.